Nina Edwards writes in her introduction to her book, Darkness, A Cultural History, "Darkness divides opinion. Some are frightened of the dark, or at least prefer to avoid it, and there are many who dislike what it appears to stand for. Others are drawn to its strange domain, to the hilarity of shadows, delighting in its uncertainties, lured by all the associations of folklore and legend, by the call of the mysterious and of unknown possibility. The history of attitudes to what we cannot quite make out, in all its physical and metaphorical manifestations, is fed by geographic and cultural context, challenging the notion of a world that is possible to comprehend fully. Darkness existed before we did, and exists independently of our concerns, but there are many ways in which it plays a role in our lives, and yet the language of dark and light is so familiar a feature of our manner of speaking that it is easy to overlook its significance. Moreover, nowadays we are primed to look to the associations of light for understanding and joy, so that we can easily forget how much each one of us relies on its polar opposite, the peaceful and sometimes reassuring state that is at times one of heightened awareness and even sublime beauty. Darkness feeds the imagination." The Anglo-Irish fantasist Lord Dunsany said, "A man is a very small thing, and the night is very large and full of wonders." Yet, in many of his stories, Dunsany also equates blackness and darkness with domination and uniformity. Revisiting some of these stories and others has been the catalyst for my thinking about darkness and blackness and nighttime. My relationship with these things is complex, and I realize I often wear black because not only is it comforting and familiar, it is tied up with the past, in which I often wore black as a sign of rebellion, but nowadays my perception of the colour black has changed. In Nina Edwards' book, she writes of dark fashion. It is the colour of formal clothing, of the cowed and of the law-abiding, of romanticism, of wandering religious fanatics, of mourning and of tired workaday uniform. And having read that, black cannot be tied down. For me, however, there is a particular perception of the colour black or darkness in general, and it's rooted in a sensibility of humility, the sense of openness to possibility or mysteriousness, and finally, the negation of clamour and cacophony. It would seem that most days I make a conscious decision to wear black as an acknowledgement of issues in the world, so there is an aspect of rebellion, but it's not tied to any particular cultural aesthetic, for example, the Gothic. And so when I think of dark clothing, I don't think of myself, I think of everything external to me. So for all that black is just a colour, it's bound up with so much more. These external concerns are particularly well articulated in Patrick Curry's book, Enchantment, Wonder in Modern Life. In an ever-increasingly crowded, noisy, overheated and brightly lit world, for example, it is often their less popular contraries that stand out and offer the solace of wonder. Without a measure of solitude, you don't know who you are, and without boundaries no meeting is possible. Take away quiet, against which sound can stand out and register as distinct, the concrete without which there is no magic, and it becomes not only deafening but meaningless mere noise. We also grossly overvalue light, while irrationally fearing darkness, or Mother Night, as one professor I know calls her, and Mother of the Light, identifying light with logos, reason, heaven and maleness drives us to disparage the sources of enchantment in mythos, emotion, earth and the female. It is not so much the dreams of reason that produce monsters, as sleepless reason. No one, proclaimed the Enlightenment philosopher Fichte, ominously, has any rights against reason. So my concerns primarily relate to domination, to the domination of nature by too much light and too much noise, but it also relates to the pernicious idea that all can be calculated and mastered and controlled, and all forces are at the command of mankind. The latter issue is reflected in Nina Edwards' book when, describing the variety of definitions of the word darkness, she writes, "The primary word in English, darkness, derives from the Old English deorc, and suggests a palpably physical entity, as in the darkness of the night. In contrast, the French language, rooted in Latin, appears to offer an abundance of terms connecting the idea of darkness with a lack of reason. Obscurity can suggest a Gallic derision for intellectual mediocrity, with even the shadowland of Le Ténèbres containing perhaps not only an older sense of opposition to the light of God, but the confidence of the Enlightenment, in which the uncertainty of shadows is dismissed for clarity's sake. And as that passage suggests, something is missing if we discount the colour black, or darkness, or the night. In the book Symbols and Allegories and Art, night is described as the primordial mother, a source of all cosmic beginnings. According to the Orphic hymns, she joined with the wind and laid a silvery egg, the moon, out of which was born Eros Phanes, the desire that propels the universe. Sky, earth, sleep and death are considered her children. As the universal womb, night is linked to the watery element and the world underground, where seeds germinate. Because of these qualities, it is the wellspring of possibilities, which are only fully realized in the light of day. In ancient art, night is portrayed as a woman wrapped in a black veil and surrounded by sleep-inducing poppies. Night also represents the dimension of dream and eros, and is a portal to the realm of fantasy and the occult. For this reason, it is associated with the goddess Hecate, and the bog of tears, the cocytus of Virgil and Dante. The Christian motif of Holy Night is another iconographic and symbolic interpretation of the same subject. The contrast between darkness and light, as we have already seen, has precedence in a variety of different cultures and a long aesthetic history. For example, in Jun'ichirō Tanizaki's book In Praise of Shadows, a treatise on the difference between Western and Eastern aesthetics, he writes, "We Orientals tend to seek our satisfactions in whatever surroundings we happen to find ourselves, to content ourselves with things as they are, and so darkness causes us no discontent. We resign ourselves to it as inevitable. If light is scarce, then light is scarce. We will immerse ourselves in the darkness, and there discover its own particular beauty. But the progressive Westerner is determined always to better his lot. From candle to oil lamp to gaslight to electric light. His quest for a brighter light never ceases. He spares no pains to eradicate even the minutest shadow." But of course, my affinity for the colour black is not anti-West. It is simply anti-domination, anti-programmicity, anti-cacophony, anti-clamour. It is a celebration of the introvert, of the quiet, of the shaded glade and the dark mountain pass. But of course, there can be no monism, there can be no dark without light, there can be no light without dark. And I am reminded of the George MacDonald story, The History of Photogen in Nycteris, in which the girl of the night and the boy of the day live lives inseparable, uncertain of each other, and living in fear, but in the end are unified. The king gave them the castle and lands of Watho, and there they lived and taught each other for many years that were not long. But hardly had one of them passed before Nycteris had come to love the day best, because it was the clothing and crown of Photogen, and she saw that the day was greater than the night, and the sun more lordly than the moon. And Photogen had come to love the night best, because it was the mother and home of Nycteris. And I think of Narcissus and Goldmund by Herman Hesse, in which Narcissus takes the way of Apollo toward light, God, reason, contemplation and reflection, and Goldmund takes the path of Dionysus toward the desires of the flesh, the lessons of earthly pleasure, and the creation of a very worldly beauty. We are sun and moon, dear friend. We are sea and land. It is not our purpose to become each other, it is to recognize each other, to learn to see the other and honor him for what he is, each the other's opposite and complement.